So Steve, I've got a couple questions for you. We see wireless being implemented into our curriculum more. Why is teaching wireless so important to our students?
Well, John, I think we're seeing a lot more devices that are available for consumers and home users and what have you that are using wireless technologies. You're starting to see a push even for some of the laptop computers that are getting thinner all the time and are going more to what they might classify as a netbook type situation. I'm not necessarily certain how those are going to all pan out, but at this stage it looks like there's some good prospects there. And even when you start looking at devices like the iPhone, other devices out there, obviously you can use that wireless internally as well. So when you're off of the cellular network, you have the Wi-Fi capabilities. Mm-hmm. Again, you start looking at devices like the cordless phones, so voice over IP, and we can do some Wi-Fi there. So there's just a lot of additional devices, and it gives us that mobility. So we're not just tethered someplace, and so obviously there's a greater and greater demand for it. So
okay,
that all is connected.
Yeah, I know you work with a lot of companies that are implementing wireless. So what are some of the concerns that when an organization is thinking about implementing wireless? What are some of the things they need to think through, and that our students should know about? You just don't hang up access points,
right?
But there needs to be some strategy involved.
Certainly. Yes, there is a lot of concerns, especially when you look at some of the facilities, if they're doing any kind of records, whether it may be, you could take a dentist's office or an orthodontic office or any healthcare fields. Obviously, there's a lot of personal information, but yet sometimes, even if they're not using them themselves, that particular wireless technology, they may want to offer wireless for, say, people in a waiting room. So there's some things that come into play there. But by the same token, they don't want to just totally open things up, because there's even some things coming down the pike right now that looks like people may be required to keep additional records. So we need to make sure that we're going to have some security in these particular devices beyond just just opening them up so that people can log in and use them, because we're going to be responsible for them. So that's one of the big issues. But again, when you start looking at some of the different environments, whether it's a factory implementation or what have you, that mobility is a big factor. So a lot of people are trying to deploy more and more wireless devices.
Okay, let's talk about some of the technologies. I mean, we all hear about N. What is N? Can you explain what the N standard's all about?
Well, there's been quite an evolution in the wireless technologies, and probably most people have heard the different terms. The wireless, the A and B, and of course A is not probably as popular or prevalent as B is, but B was around quite a while, and it was the one that kind of caught on. And then G come about, and G was a good standard because it gave us additional speed, but yet it was still that backward compatibility with B, so we could really have a mixed mode environment. But still, when you look at wireless technologies, it is a shared medium. So even when you have 54 megabits per second, the more devices you get on there, the less throughput you have. So there's still a need for additional speed there as you get in, and once again our devices are getting faster, so people expect more. It's like they never have enough anyhow. So the newest standard coming about is N, and there's some different. The spec hasn't been totally settled. I've seen up to 540 megabits per second, for instance, as far as the top speeds. So, it's going to give us a lot more capabilities, getting off that wired network and then being able to still
So it's faster to the wired.
Much faster. And then it also has a little bit different handling of how it does its input and output. They have what they call a MIMO technologies, which is multiple input, multiple output. So it has multiple radios. It actually uses both the 5 megahertz and the 2.4 megahertz. So it takes advantage of that as well.
Okay, I think one of the things we're also seeing is the evolution between what we call autonomous access points and lightweight access points. What is that? What's the difference between them, and what do students need to know about that?
Well, I guess the autonomous access point, and I think most people can relate if you take your traditional home-based router, whether you have, there's a lot of popular brands out there, of course, Linksys and D-Link and many others out there. Basically, those would be classified as an autonomous device. More in the corporate environment, you think maybe of the Cisco type devices that were the autonomous, and you actually had to go out and configure each one of them.
Okay.
The lightweight systems basically have a controller, so that now you can do all your setup within the controller. So I can set my security policies. I can set, for instance, the speeds that it's going to accommodate, things of that nature. I can set what networks it's on. I can have multiple networks that I can provide wireless access to, and I can do that all through the control mechanism of this controller system. That controller will also give me some other capabilities, things like detecting maybe some what we would classify as rogue access points. So, and that could be just as simple. It might be something intentional, but it could also be something as simple as somebody brought in their home-based router and thinking, well, I want to have some wireless access here. I don't have it. So I'm going to plug my home-based router into the company network. And obviously that can be a problem for us because all of a sudden we see people getting IP addresses that aren't in our ranges, and we're saying, well, what's going on here?
So security and management then.
Security and management both, absolutely. Okay. So it's a big factor.
All right, well, this has been an introduction of wireless standards and what's happening in the wireless world. I want to thank you for joining us today, Steve.
Well, thank you very much, John, for having me.